Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me for my latest video here on Kevin Gray Sports. If you're listening to the podcast, you can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can also like and comment on the video on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. What a win it was for the Dallas Mavericks as they get the win over the Toronto Raptors 136-125 on the road as they get their first win of their 4-game road trip as Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and PJ Washington combined for 82 of the Mavericks' 136 points as Luka Doncic gets his 11th triple-double of the season, his 67th career triple-double overall on his 25th birthday. Kyrie Irving scoring 15 of his 29 points in that fourth quarter was absolutely spectacular. Luka Doncic contributing with his 30 points, 16 assists, and 11 rebounds in the game. But the story was our guy, PJ Washington, who had 23 points, a season high for him as a Dallas Maverick, going 5 of 10 from downtown, also collecting 6 rebounds, had 3 block shots as well, stuffing the stat sheet all night long. PJ Washington scoring a Mavericks career high 23 points in the win over the Toronto Raptors, where the Mavericks now move to 20-9 on the season when they have at least 5 guys in double figures, and that's what they had in this game against Toronto. Good game for Tim Hardaway Jr., a bounce-back game for him with 16 points, knocking down 4 3-pointers in the game, the most points that he's had since earlier on this month against the New York Knicks. He was really good in this game. You also got 13 points on 6 of 7 shooting from Daniel Gafford, who also had 7 rebounds in the game as well. So a total team effort for the Mavericks, who came into the game on Wednesday in kind of a must-win situation. You say, Kevin, it's late February, and the Mavericks still got plenty of games to go as the regular season goes on. Why would it be considered a must-win? Well, as you and I have discussed, the Western Conference is really treacherous right now with a lot of teams playing extremely well. You saw the Los Angeles Lakers overcome a 21-point deficit to the Los Angeles Clippers to win their game on Wednesday night. You're seeing how things are shaping up in the West down the stretch, and the Mavericks need every single win that they can get, especially as they get ready to take on the Boston Celtics on Friday evening. But for Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and especially PJ Washington, this was an important win that they had to have after dropping their first 2 games on the road to the Indiana Pacers, and then, of course, having the buzzer beater loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers on Tuesday. And this is also something to think about as well. The Mavericks came into Wednesday night's game on the second night of a back-to-back after losing to Cleveland on Tuesday, then having to travel through the night to get to Toronto to play in Toronto on Wednesday evening. And they came out, especially in that third quarter, where they used a 25-7 run to be able to take a 14-point lead, outscoring the Toronto Raptors 40-25 in what was that decisive third quarter. We'll get to more of that in a little bit, but I want to go through some of this game because for PJ Washington, one of the things that I said going into the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, I wanted to see how he would respond and see if he could start to get some easy buckets and be able to be a scoring force for this Mavericks team, because we know that he's been bringing it on the defensive end, and you saw that again on Wednesday against the Toronto Raptors. There were at least 2 times where he stopped fast break layups with good hands and stripping the basketball and ending those fast break opportunities for the Toronto Raptors. We talked about the block shots that he had in the game as well. His defensive energy and presence has been extremely consistent for this team, and you've seen that continue to play out. But it was his scoring, especially in the first quarter, where he scored 13 points in the first quarter, knocking down a couple of 3-pointers as he started 2 of 2 from downtown. He missed a floater, and then he followed up his own miss to be able to get a basket, had a strip on a potential layup in transition. PJ Washington was the one that set the tone in the game from an aggressive scoring standpoint for the Mavericks to start off with, as he scored 10 of the Mavericks' first 16 points of that first quarter, as the Mavericks were able to lead by 2 at the end of 1, with PJ Washington, as I mentioned, scoring 13 points. He also got some help from, of course, Daniel Gafford, who was really good in that first quarter as well, providing the offensive rebounding that the Mavericks needed with 3 offensive rebounds, scoring 8 points in that first quarter. And that was something that you had to pay attention to from the Raptors standpoint, because the Raptors came into the game 7th in the NBA in offensive rebounding, and you knew that the Mavericks are going to have to be able to compete on the glass, and that they did. They actually out-rebounded the Toronto Raptors in the game, as you look at it, 50-44. So they did their job cleaning up on the defensive glass. They had 39 defensive rebounds, and they also had 11 offensive rebounds. So they won in the rebounding department. And when you've looked at games for the Mavericks this year, where they're within 6 to 7 when it comes to being in that rebounding margin, they win a lot of ball games. And you saw that again as the Mavericks used a 14-2 run to be able to get that lead up to 5 in that first quarter, ultimately leading at the end of 36-34. So a really strong start for PJ Washington, who really needed to be able to get off to a good start. And you saw that with the confidence of knocking down shots from the outside. And that's one thing that we've talked about on this show, is that if PJ Washington can start to consistently knock down shots from the outside, he adds yet another dimension to this offense that allows this team to be much more dynamic on the offensive end when you know you're going to get the scoring output from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving on a night-to-night basis. Who's going to be that third scorer for the Mavericks night in and night out to be able to provide them another punch on the offensive end? We know Washington is capable of big offensive games. Before being traded to the Mavericks, he had a 40-plus point game for the Charlotte Hornets earlier this year. So he's capable of big offensive outputs, and you saw that in the game against the Toronto Raptors. Before we go any further, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video as we hear from Aura, who is the sponsor of our video today. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you hanging out with me through that quick break as we heard from our sponsor today from Aura. The Mavericks getting that 136-125 win over the Toronto Raptors. We talked about how PJ Washington set the tone for the Mavericks early on in the game with the 13 points that he had in the first quarter. Luka Doncic scoring 6 points in that first quarter for the Mavericks. As you moved on to the second quarter, the Toronto Raptors were able to get back into the game as the Mavericks got off to a slow start, going just 3 of 10 from the field to start the game. But at the same time, Luka Doncic scoring 8 of the Mavericks' first 12 points of that second quarter. But the Raptors really got back in it, being able to knock down some shots as they went on an 11-2 run to be able to take a quick 2-point lead midway through that second quarter as they went 6 of 14 from the field. But it was Tim Hardaway Jr., yes, the much maligned Tim Hardaway Jr., who really got the Mavericks back into this game at one point, scoring 9 straight points, giving the Mavericks the lead back at 59-57 with just under 4 minutes left in that second quarter. And you saw the confidence that Tim Hardaway Jr. was playing with. Usually when Hardaway goes through these stretches where he's not playing well, it can feel like it's forever. but usually it's about a 2 to 3 week stretch where he goes cold. But then as he starts to come out of it, you could see the confidence for Hardaway start to come back. And that was really evident in that second quarter there, where the Mavericks needed his outside shooting to really be able to help them keep in the game in that second quarter, against the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors did wind up leading by 1 at halftime, 67-66. They scored 33 points in that second quarter, but at the same time, you felt much better about the Mavericks, especially Tim Hardaway Jr. coming around in that second quarter with his ability to knock down shots. And again, that's going to be important down the stretch. No matter how you may feel about Tim Hardaway Jr. and the ups and downs and the THJ roller coaster experience that you and I get taken on when it comes to his play, he's a streaky shooter. And when he's on, you want him on your team and you want him to be able to handle business, especially knocking down shots from the outside. And don't worry, I'm going to get to Dante Exum because Dante Exum made his return to the Mavericks as well against the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday and was really able to provide them some quality minutes as well. He only played, of course, as Jason Kidd talked about it in the pregame, he was only going to play 10 to 12 minutes in the game. He actually wound up playing 16 minutes, so a little bit more than what the Mavericks actually had planned on, as Jason Kidd mentioned, that he wanted to play him in about 3 to 4 minute bursts for about 12 minutes of the game. Dante Exum wound up playing 16 minutes in the game and was a +6, but more on him a little bit later on. But good to see Tim Hardaway Jr. respond when the Mavericks needed him to in that second quarter to keep them in that game. Emmanuel quickly had 10 points for the Toronto Raptors, but at the same time, Mavericks feel good going into halftime as they try, of course, to end that 2-game skid that they were on, which they needed to do to give them confidence going into the game on Friday against the Boston Celtics. As we move on to the second half, obviously for Luka Doncic, he was able to get Derek Lively involved, especially in that third quarter. The Mavs, of course, down by 1 to start that third quarter. Derek Lively scoring 6 of the Mavericks' first 9 points, and his activity was evident. Had a couple of dunks, was able to get himself an offensive rebound and a putback as well. He really set the tone for the Mavericks from an energy standpoint, and the Mavericks, throughout the course of the game, they wound up finishing the game with 11 blocks. We talked about P.J. Washington with the 3 that he had. Derek Lively finished the game with 5 blocks. His activity constantly around the rim with the block shots, the shot deterrence, and being able to alter shots, that is something that the Mavericks have been desperately needing from a center position, and they've been needing it for a long time. And Derek Lively really played well in that aspect. As I mentioned, with the guy going 4-4 from the field, had 4 rebounds, but it was the defense of Derek Lively who was able to not only have the 5 blocks, but also a couple of steals as well. So the rotations, being able to help off weak side and being able to get some of those block shots, he should have had he could have had a couple of more, but of course there was some goaltending that he had throughout the course of the game. But that is something that he'll continue to grow from. But I was extremely impressed with the IQ, the rotations, as I mentioned, helping off weak side, being able to recognize when he had opportunities to block some shots and be able to do so. And he really set the tone in that third quarter for what the Mavericks were trying to do. Mavericks were able to use what, as I mentioned, a 25-7 run in that third quarter to wind up going up by 14. They scored 40 points in that third quarter, and you saw the variety of guys being able to take over in that third quarter. P.J. Washington knocking down his 4th three-pointer of the game in that third quarter. Kyrie Irving, which we'll get to here in a little bit, as he really took over in that fourth quarter. Luka Doncic with a series of incredible moves, making that amazing fadeaway jumper as the Mavericks had went up by 5 with about 5 minutes left in that third quarter. Dante Exum, I told you we would get to him. Dante Exum knocking down a 3-pointer on the right wing for his first points of the game. That came with about 4.5 minutes left in that third quarter, in the midst of that 25-7 run that gave the Mavs the biggest lead at that particular point at 8. And that is something that Dante Exum was doing before he got hurt, dealing with the heel injury, dealing with the knee injury. He was knocking down shots, providing the Mavericks another ball handler in that second unit. And when he was in the starting lineup as well, it was good to see Dante Exum be able to knock down that shot from the outside. Hopefully, as he continues to get more and more confidence as he returns from that injury. We will see what we were seeing from Dante Exum before he got injured, which was a guy that was really coming along, getting confidence in knocking down shots from the outside, but also providing energy on both ends of the floor, especially on the defensive end. I thought Dante Exum, in the time that he had, played well for the Mavericks and just gives them yet another dimension. And we've talked about this for this team with the acquisitions of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. You can go 9 to 10 deep on this team with the amount of guys, especially when they're clicking on the offensive cylinders that they were against Toronto. There was no Maxi Kleber in this game as he continued to deal with that right small toe dislocation. The Mavericks sitting him out for maintenance with that so that he could possibly be ready to go on Friday against a big Boston Celtics team where they will need all the front court size that they can get between Lively, Gafford, and Maxi Kleber when they take on the likes of Kristaps Porzingis, obviously with Al Horford as well when it comes to the Boston Celtics and the front court that they present, even though they are able to stretch the floor from the three-point line with Porzingis, with Horford being able to knock down outside shots. Size is needed to deal with a big Celtics team that features Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and as I mentioned, Porzingis and Al Horford. But for Dante Exum, it was good to see him back. He was able to really help this team be able to get some things done. And, of course, Luka Doncic, spectacular in that third quarter. My favorite play of that third quarter, the two-hand touchdown pass to Daniel Gafford in transition. Gafford gets the hoop and the harm, gets the dunk, is able to finish the three-point play. That put the Mavericks up by 11 with just under 3 minutes left in that third quarter, and you saw that they were off to the races. One of the things that the Mavericks were doing well earlier on in the season that they got back to doing in this game, when you look at what they were able to do, they forced 12 turnovers in this game. They scored 19 points off of those turnovers. You would like to see the Mavericks protect the ball a little bit better. They had 16 turnovers in this game, but at the same time, when they had their opportunities to get out in transition, that's exactly what they did and were able to take advantage of those times when they could do so. And Daniel Gafford was the beneficiary of that pass from Luka Doncic as he continues to have the incredible vision and the passing. You saw the pass that he had to Tim Hardaway Jr., where he knocked down that three-pointer in the left corner. Just the vision and the accuracy and the awareness. I try not to marvel as much as I do at Luka Doncic because it feels like it's just commonplace for him night in and night out. But when you see him making the incredible passes and what he's able to do to set up his teammates and have them in the right position, and then the confidence that he continues to show in them night in and night out, how could you not love playing with a guy like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who continue to put this team in the best positions offensively night after night? And that's my biggest takeaway from this game as we move toward, the fourth quarter, which is the comfortability that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are playing with. We mentioned it before. Since around February 5th, this duo is averaging nearly 59 points per game. You saw it again tonight, exactly on that number at 59 points against the Toronto Raptors on Wednesday night. These two understanding how to play off of one another, allowing each other to take turns when they have the opportunities to do so. And this bodes well as you go forward for the rest of the season when Kyrie Irving has the opportunities to be able to take that load off of Luka Doncic. Doncic in this game playing 35 minutes. Kyrie Irving also being able to play 35 minutes. So we're talking about the balance between the two of them, not just from a scoring standpoint, not just from a shot creation for themselves and for their teammates standpoint, but their ability to shoulder the load for this team to be able to have consistent output night in and night out. And you saw how well that they are playing off of each other, recognizing each other's tendencies and putting each other in the right spots to be able to have the kind of offensive music and firepower that we have seen from the two of them. And they are clicking on all cylinders right now from an offensive standpoint, night in and night out. And that gets me to the fourth quarter because Kyrie Irving was an absolute madman in that fourth quarter. As I mentioned, scoring 15 of his 29 points in that fourth quarter. The Mavs, of course, started the quarter up by 14 after that huge run in the third quarter. Kyrie Irving wound up scoring 13 of the first 16 points for the Mavericks in that fourth quarter. And as I tweeted out at Kevin Gray Sports, Kyrie Irving is the closer. That is something that you love with Kyrie Irving and having him on this team. His ability to get into fourth quarters, recognize the moment, and then be able to take over. And here's the big thing, and what happened on Wednesday night that didn't happen against the Indiana Pacers. When Kyrie Irving started to take over in that fourth quarter against Indiana, for some reason, the Mavericks went away from him as he got them within 4, but ultimately the Pacers went on a 20-4 run to reestablish what was a 20-point lead. But at the same time, Kyrie Irving in the game on Wednesday got hot in the fourth quarter, and the Mavericks kept feeding him. When you've got a guy that's been a big-time shot maker, an NBA champion, someone who knows how to relish in those big moments, when he gets cooking, you keep feeding him. And that's exactly what the Mavericks were able to do in that fourth quarter. I mentioned Dante Exum and that 3 that he hit in the third quarter in the midst of that 25-7 run. He had 4 big assists in that fourth quarter for the Mavericks as they scored 30 points to go on to win 136-125. But it was Kyrie Irving setting the offensive tone in that fourth quarter. Luka Doncic throughout the course of the game, finding his teammates time and time again. While Luka Doncic didn't have necessarily a great shooting night as the game went on, he still wound up finishing 11 of 23 from the field. Kyrie Irving going 11 of 20 for the game. You look at the numbers specifically in that fourth quarter for Kyrie Irving. Irving going 7 of 11 from the field in nearly all 12 minutes of that fourth quarter as he scored the 15 points and really put the Mavericks on his back. And that is what you love to see from Kyrie Irving for this team. The ability to put the team on his back when he needs to, but understanding and recognize the moment when he had to do it. And you're hoping as they continue to play better teams that will continue to be the same thing that happens for them throughout the course of the rest of the regular season. You've seen it against the Oklahoma City Thunder. You saw it against the Phoenix Suns in the middle of that 7-game win streak. You saw it in the beginning of the fourth quarter against the Indiana Pacers, where the Mavericks were on their comeback trail against the Pacers in that game, but ultimately wound up losing. When Kyrie Irving gets going, you continue to put him in spots to succeed because he can create his own shot. You saw the way that he was knocking down 3-pointers, whether it be on the left wing, floaters off the glass. The shot making, the difficult shot making that Kyrie Irving does is unparalleled in this league, and he was on full display time and time again. And for PJ Washington to be able to cap off the game, you saw what he was able to do with that dagger 3-pointer with about $1:15 left in the fourth quarter, capping off what was just a terrific night for him. I'm hoping this is a springboard for PJ Washington to continue to show the confidence in his abilities on the offensive end. And more importantly, and as Jason Kidd talked about it after the game was over with, he continued to emerge as the third option for this team. Because with him being the third scoring option, you know what you're getting from Luka, you know what you're getting from Kyrie Irving. But if Washington, with his size, his athleticism, his ability to put the ball on the deck and now knocking down open threes, he has the confidence to be able to really make things difficult for opposing defenses night in and night out. Because one thing, if you're going to play with Luka and Kyrie, you've got to make teams pay for leaving you wide open, and you've got to be able to knock down some shots. And PJ Washington did a terrific job of that on Wednesday night against the Toronto Raptors. So what I thought was a gut check win for the Mavericks, a win that they absolutely had to have after starting their road trip 0-2 with losses to the Pacers and then the gut-wrenching loss that they had against the Cleveland Cavaliers, thanks to Max Strus's 60-foot buzzer beater to win the game for the Cavs. You had to get this game on the road against the Toronto Raptors, getting ready to play the Boston Celtics on Friday night. So now the Mavericks sit there at 34-25, 16-12 on the road. As you look at the current Western Conference standings, something that we will continue to watch and monitor as the rest of the season goes on, based on what the Mavericks were able to do on Wednesday night. We'll get that updated here in just a moment. But at the same time, you know where the standings are. You know what the Mavericks have to continue to do in order to win ball games going forward. As I mentioned, at 34-25 now on the season, they currently sit in 7th based on their getting their win on Wednesday against Toronto. So as you look at it right now, Suns in 5th, Pelicans in 6th after they lost on Wednesday, Mavericks sitting there in 7th as they are a half game behind the Pelicans and the Suns. The Suns, they're behind a half game for the 5th spot. And, of course, the Mavericks own the tiebreaker over the Phoenix Suns. So a lot to continue to play out, but that is the nature of the Western Conference. One win can have you back into the top 6. One win or 2 losses can have you dropping from 5th to 8th in the West. That is why the game against Toronto was so important for them to get that win, as now, as I mentioned, 34-25, 16-12 away from the American Airlines Center. They've got a difficult one against Boston on Friday, but the Mavericks, 8-2 in their last 10 games, were able to get themselves a really nice bounce back win, a tough bounce back win over the Toronto Raptors. And, of course, for Luka Doncic, he continues to make history. Luka Doncic now with 39 30-point triple-doubles. That is now 3rd all-time behind just Oscar Robertson and Russell Westbrook. He also has the first 30-point triple-double on his birthday, as, of course, he turned 25 years old on Wednesday. Not a bad way to celebrate your 25th birthday with a road win and continuing to kind of make the kind of history that Luka does, it seems like, on a nightly basis to be able to get the win for the Mavericks. So Mavericks get the 136-125 win over the Toronto Raptors. They now move on to Boston on Friday, and more importantly, some confidence based on what they were able to do. And I really love the game from P.J. Washington. That was important from him. We heard a report from Shams Charania earlier on Wednesday that the Mavericks feel like the acquisition of P.J. Washington is akin to what the Denver Nuggets did when they acquired Aaron Gordon. And you know how Aaron Gordon affected what the Denver Nuggets are able to do on both ends of the floor. Hopefully for P.J. Washington, he can continue to do the same because he has the talent, he has the capability, and now hopefully the confidence as he continues to play and get more comfortable in this offense. And he talked about that post-game, continuing to learn his role and having the confidence in his abilities to execute what the Mavericks are asking him to do night in and night out. And if that is the case, this team can continue to grow and get better. We've seen them go through their ups and downs. We've talked about them playing as many starting lineups as they have. We've talked about the injury adversity that they've gone through this season as a team. But now, as they get fully formed and healthy, consistency is going to be the name of the game going forward. Not playing down the competition, but beating the teams that you're supposed to down the stretch, but now beating the teams that may be better record-wise that you can play with because you have a top 5 talent in Luka Doncic. Kyrie Irving playing at a 50, 40, 90 type of level the way that he's been playing. He's had a terrific month of February and closed out his month of February in spectacular fashion with the 29 points. But Luka, Kyrie, and P.J. Washington, with big shout-outs to Tim Hardaway Jr., Daniel Gafford as well for the way that they played in this game. A really nice team effort. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, Mavericks now 20-9 on the season when they have at least 5 guys in double figures. And the word I would like to use for that is balance. You can't have just Luka and Kyrie going off in a particular game. You saw that against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We were waiting for someone else to come with Luka, and Kyrie was able to really help do that in the game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But ultimately, they fell short, even though they had the lead thanks to P.J. Washington with the bucket that he had with 2 seconds to go. And, of course, ultimately they fell. But this time, they were able to use their defense in that third quarter to really be able to handle things. They held the Raptors to just 25 points in that decisive third quarter, outscoring them by 15. And we will continue to harp on it as long as I talk about this Mavs team. Defense turning into offense and consistently doing that night in and night out. And it paid off big time against the Raptors in that third quarter. So the Mavericks now get ready to finish up their road trip, and then they come home on Sunday to take on the Philadelphia 76ers as they move forward in the Western Conference. But a big win for the Mavericks, big bounce-back win that they needed in a mini must-win situation based on what they're dealing with as they move forward for the rest of this season. Again, this has been Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you joining me on this episode here. If you're listening to it on the podcast, be sure to download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast, the official Mavericks podcast for 97.1 The Freak. home of Dallas Mavericks basketball. I'm your Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak. You can catch me on every Mavericks radio broadcast. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, make sure you make sure you subscribe and like and comment on the video as well. Let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks after the win. What's the vibe check for you after the Mavericks get the win against Toronto? They have the day off on Thursday before taking on Boston on Friday. This has been Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, presented to you today by Aura. I'll talk to you later. Peace.